Good evening, everyone. This week is Parshas Shkolim. This week is Parshas Titzave, Tavshin Pei. And besides being Parshas Titzave, it is also the Shabbos we call Parshas Zachor. The mafter, the eighth aliyah of the reading of the Torah on Shabbos, is not a repetition of the end of the weekly Parsha, but a special reading that we call the reading of Zachor. Zachor is what we read is at the end of Parshas Titzave, towards the end of the book of Devarim, where we have the mitzvah of Zachor Eis Asher Asalach Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you. This is Amalek, as described in the end of Parshas Beshalach, was the first nation to attack the Jewish people after the exodus from Egypt and the splitting of the Red Sea. That even though everyone else was so terrified of the Jewish people, Amalek still was brazen enough to attack them. And the mitzvah that the Torah tells us in Devarim of Zachor to remember is to remember how they attacked us when we left Egypt. And that remembering, meaning that they were the first to attack us after we left Egypt and after the splitting of the Red Sea. And actually, when we have the ability to do so, we actually have a mitzvah to obliterate them. So we have a mitzvah to remember, and essentially that remembering is meant to bring us to obliterating them. But even when we cannot obliterate them, because we don't have the ability to do so, we still have the mitzvah to remember that whole episode. And it's that part of the Torah that tells us to remember that the end of Parshas Titzave, to remember what Amalek did, that is a Torah obligation. We fulfill that Torah obligation of remembering there. Remembering doesn't just mean in your mind. Remembering there means to actually say it. And that's a Torah obligation. We fulfill it once a year, every year, with that reading. And the reason why we do it now, we do it on the Shabbos before Purim, is because Purim, we read about the destruction of Haman and his family. Haman was a descendant of Amalek. Part of the Purim story is this destruction of Amalek's descendants, and therefore the sages instituted that we should actually perform the mitzvah of Zachor, of remembering, to obliterate, to remember what Amalek did and to obliterate them. We do that next, right before Purim, where something like that took place. And our practice is that we do it with a minyan, we do it reading from the Torah. And actually, if a person would not be able to make it to shul on Shabbos, or whatever reason they're homebound, what they should do is take a chumash. Even though it's not a sefer Torah, they should take a chumash from the book of Devarim and read that section at the end of Parshas Titzave of Zachor to fulfill it, at least according to the opinions who say that essentially you can fulfill it just from reading it from the chumash. Okay, so I want to begin this week's class with a thought regarding Parshas Zachor. Now, as I mentioned, the mitzvah to remember is recorded at the end of Titzave in the book of Devarim, and that's what we read from. The actual story of Amalek attacking the Jewish people is at the end of Parshas Beshalach, a few weeks ago. And there the Torah says, Vayavai Amalek vayilachem im Yisrael b'Refidim. Amalek came and waged war with the Jewish people in a place called Refidim. There is a medrash in the Torah de Belio that says like this. It's a fascinating medrash. Now, just a little bit of background here. So, Amalek was the grandson of Esav. Esav, Yaakov's brother. Esav had a son, Eliphaz. Eliphaz had a son, Amalek. And when we talk about the nation of Amalek, they are descendants of that grandson of Esav. And it's important to also know for this medrash that Eliphaz, the son of Esav, actually, this is something that we've spoken about. I'm sure you've heard of it, and that is that after Yaakov took the blessings from Yitzchak, received the blessings from Yitzchak, and then Yitzchak and Rivka sent him to Haran to find a wife. So Esav sent his son Eliphaz to kill Yaakov. And at the end, the medrash says that because Eliphaz grew up at the lap of Yitzchak, meaning he had some kind of he was influenced by his grandfather. At the end, he didn't kill Yaakov. He said to Yaakov, "What am I supposed to do?" My father said, "I have to kill you." So Yaakov said, "I'll give you everything that I have. That'll be enough." But the Medrash says that Eliphaz didn't kill Yaakov because of the influence that Yitzchak had on him. Okay. With that being said, the Medrash in Torah Develio says, Amalek hayomer el Eliphaz aviv. Amalek said to Eliphaz's father, Mihu sheyeresh ha'olam hazeh v'ha'olam haba. Who's going to inherit? Who's going to take possession of this world and the world to come? That's Amalek. The original Amalek is asking that from his father. Because let's remember, these were people that were, they had a relationship with Yitzchak. And they knew a lot more than whether they lived by it or not, but they knew of these concepts. So Amalek says to Eliphaz, who's going to inherit, who's going to take possession of this world and the next world? That's his question. His question could have been, what was his question? Who's going to get this world and the next world? Do you want to know who's going to get both? Do you want to know who's going to get one, who's going to get the other? But that's his question.
Who can ask?
Amalek, when he asked Eliphaz, who's going to get Olam Hazeh Olam Haba?
He asked his father.
He asked his father. Now, was his question who's going to get both? Was his question who's going to get one, who's going to get the other? It doesn't say. But that was his question. Who's going to get it? Amalek Eliphaz el Amalek. Eliphaz, the son of Esav, said to his son Amalek, B'nai Yisrael yarshin ha'olam hazeh v'olam haba. The Jewish people will be taking possession of this world and the next world. Okay. Which I understand that to mean to say, well, let's go a little further. Lochein, therefore, lech achshav, go now, v'chafar lohen boiris sichon marish shalmayim. Go dig these different types of water gatherings of water, so that they and their cattle can drink from it. Go dig these different kind of water holes for them to drink from. And make roads for them. Im tasakain, if you do so, tiske v'tiresh v'tinchal v'tavei leilam haba. Then you will merit and inherit and come to the world to come. That's what he said to Amalek. He's saying, son, listen to me. Okay, listen to me. B'nai Yisrael are the ones that will be taking possession of this world and the next world.
But you can change it.
No, now you could change it. So now what you should do is, now in this world, do things for them. That's what he said. Make these things for them, and then you'll also be able to get a portion of the world to come.
To be part of this.
Right. You'll get a portion of the world to come. Meaning you should focus your life in this world on serving the Jewish people, and then you'll also be able to get Olam Haba, the world to come. So my understanding of this is that when Eliphaz said this world belongs to the Jewish people, means it's meant to serve the Jewish people. We don't necessarily see the world that way, but that's what the world is about. When Yaakov got the blessings from Yitzchak, those blessings were meant to say that in essence, Yaakov, this world, according to many commentaries, Yitzchak wanted Esav to get the blessings of this world and be able to take care of Yaakov, who's going to study Torah. And Rivka said, not going to work that way. Esav is not going to cooperate. Yaakov needs to take care of himself. So this world essentially is meant to belong to Yaakov so that he can serve Hashem and merit the world to come. That he is there for the world is primarily for him. Now, and therefore, Eliphaz says to Amalek, so if you're smart, right, now in this world, do things for them, and then you'll also be able to get a portion of the world to come.
But how son Esav knew about because of the grandfather?
Yeah. Esav was a Russia, but he wasn't unlearned.
Okay.
It's not like he didn't know and understand things.
Okay.
and his children also knew it. And Eliphaz, as we said, Eliphaz didn't kill Yaakov because he was strongly influenced by Yitzchak. And he's going and he's saying this is what he's saying to his son. Okay, and what was Amalek's reaction?
Okay.
No. Amalek's reaction was Abahulo Yasakain. Amalek didn't do that. I think that I understand that to mean, but once basically, Eliphaz made this impression on him, made this impression on him. Amalek went out to destroy the world, which means to say, I understand it to mean that Amalek, it's like, a father says to his son, listen to me. Listen to me. This is what you should do. And what does the son say? Dad, no way. No way. Not doing it. Not doing it. Not only not doing it, I'm going to do the opposite of it. I'm going to go and I'm going to destroy the world. It means I'm going to change things around. I'm going to make sure I'm going to be the one that's going to make things different. Now, does that mean Amalek was looking for Elam Haba? I don't know. But at least it was looking for this world. And to say, no, this world is my world. It's not going to be Yaakov's world. It's going to be my world. So this medrash is a fascinating medrash about what was it that got Amalek going. What got Amalek going against the Jewish people was the fact that, according to this medrash, when Amalek was told that the world is meant to belong and to serve Yaakov, meaning to serve the servant of Hashem, Amalek said, no, that's not what it's going to be. That's not what it's going to be. And therefore, when the time came, when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, they left Egypt, and after all the miracles and everything, that's when Amalek came and said, no way, not happening. If I can stop this, if I can do something against this, I'm going to do it. Because that was because that's what happened. That's the kind of reaction he had to this. The reaction he had to this said, no, I'm not going to allow this. And that's really part of the whole mentality of Amalek, about the fact that, he's told that the world is meant to be in service of Hashem. That's what it means. The world is meant for Yaakov. The world is meant to be in the service of Hashem because it's Hashem's world. And that's not what Amalek wants to hear. Amalek wants the world to be his world. And therefore, that is what set him off to go ahead and to attack the Jewish people, even at the time that it was so clear that they were Hashem's chosen people. Okay, let's get to the parsha now.
Well, it is a very
Fascinating.
Famous midrash.
I don't know. I found it. I know I've heard about this medrash before. I've heard about it. I thought there was another medrash that actually it was Esav who told him this. But when I was looking around, I see it was Eliphaz who told him this.
But the ideas in Amalek came from Esav. This is a kind of standard.
What came from?
From Esav.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the Chumash. When it goes through the at the end of Parshas Vayishlach, it goes through the whole family of Esav. Amalek's there. And what's interesting is Amalek wasn't even a child of Eliphaz's regular wife. He was a child of what's called a concubine.
But this is the same Amalek they mentioned in.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is in this week's parsha. It's in Parak Chav Ches, chapter 28, pasuk Lamed Vav, verse 36. So the pasuk reads 28:36. So as we know, this week's parsha is dedicated to the Big Day Kahuna, the priestly garments, speaking primarily about the garments of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest. And Parak Chav Ches, pasuk Lamed Vav reads, Vasisa Tzitz Zahav Tahar. You shall make a tzitz. A tzitz, they translate as a frontlet. Frontlet means something you wear on your head, on your forehead. So you shall make a tzitz Zahav Tahar, pure gold. Upitachta aleim petuchei chaisem kodesh l'Hashem. And engrave on it the seal inscription, the words Kodesh l'Hashem, holy to God. So that means that on this golden frontlet, using that English word, the golden tzitz had inscribed on it the words Kodesh LaHashem, which means holy to God. Right?
But Hashem, it means the
Yes,
four letter.
four-letter name. Now, the Gemara in Sukkah, Tav Hei Amud Aleph, page 5a, says like this. The way those two words were written, I hope you're gonna. It gets a little bit confusing. So imagine you have these two words, Kodesh LaHashem, right? Two Hebrew words, Kodesh LaHashem, right? So Hebrew goes from right to left, and it would say on one line, Kodesh LaHashem. The Talmud says, according to one opinion, no, that's not how it was written. The two words were actually one was on top of the other. And it wasn't the word Kodesh on top and the word LaHashem at the bottom. But rather, it was Hashem's name on top and Kodesh Le, which means holy to. I mean, it's just that one letter that got that prefix that goes in the beginning of the word that means to. Kodesh Lamed, holy to, was on the bottom.
What's makes sense?
1 second. This Gemara says this, okay? Which means if you looked at that tzitz, you would have read it as Hashem Kodesh La. That's how you'd read it. And so why? Why was it that way? So there's a very interesting explanation. And the explanation comes from one of the commentators on the Gemara, known as the Rashash. His name was Reb Shmuel Strashin. He lived in the beginning of the 19th century, and he's known as the Rashash. That's an acronym for Rab Shmuel Strashin. And the Rashash explains why things were like this in the following way. So I'm going to ask you a question. Whichever way you read this Kodesh LaHashem, because there was an opinion in the Gemara that says it was regular. It says holy to Hashem. What's holy to Hashem? On the tzitz, it says the words Kodesh LaHashem. What's holy to Hashem? What's it going on? What are those two words referring to?
Coins.
You're saying it refers to the Kohen. So the Kohen Gadol is walking around with a tzitz that says Kodesh LaHashem, and it's saying he's holy. He's walking around tzitz that says he's holy to God. Okay, so Hashem said to do. Maybe the Rashash says no. That's not what it's going on. And when we put everything together, you'll understand. You'll understand what he means. Now, so one of the garments that the Kohen Gadol wore was called the Choshen, the breastplate. Okay, and in the breastplate were 12 different stones, different precious stones, and on each stone was engraved the names of the tribes. One stone said Reuven, the other one said Shimon, Levi, etc. Okay, so you've got the Kohen Gadol is wearing the tzitz on his forehead, and lower down in his body, over his heart, is this Choshen with the names of the Jewish people engraved on it. Says the Rashash, the words Kodesh LaHashem on the tzitz are not referring to the Kohen Gadol. It's going on the names of the tribes inscribed below on the stones in the Choshen. Okay, just take it right now, okay? Those words, Kodesh LaHashem, are really meant to go together with all the names of the tribes. Which really means that, okay, so what does that mean? So you look at the Kohen Gadol, it says, Kodesh LaHashem Reuven? That's not how you would read it. If you want to say holy to Hashem is Reuven, you want to say Reuven is holy to Hashem, you'd be reading it as Reuven Kodesh LaHashem. Reuven is holy to Hashem, which means that you have the stone Reuven here, and you should be reading it as Reuven Kodesh LaHashem. Now, in order to do that, to read it as Reuven Kodesh LaHashem, that means you have Reuven, you have Kodesh on the bottom line, LaHashem on top. If it would have said Kodesh LaHashem just across, you wouldn't know exactly what it's going on. But now that you see on the tzitz, Kodesh La Hashem, right, where the word Kodesh La Hashem is on the bottom and the name of Hashem is on top, which means you're supposed to be reading it from the bottom to the top, then now you know, now that helps you understand that's part of something else that's being read from below up. And that's referring to the names of the tribes on the breastplate. So therefore, it's Ruvain Kodesh La Hashem. Now, why the Lamed, had to be separated from Hashem's name? That's not our discussion right now. Discussion is why is it on separate lines with seemingly out of order? The answer is if you want to make it, if you want to see it as reading it together with the names. Well, the names are below. That means you got to read from below up. So if you're reading below up, then it works. Ruvain, Kodesh, Hashem.
Maybe this means because of the all tribes, this is Israel nation.
Fine, but at the end of the day, you're still going to read. You're still reading it up because you're still reading the names of the tribes that are below. So that's a really interesting explanation as to why it was that way. Now, one other thought about these names on the Choshen, on the stones in the Choshen. So there's a commentary on the Chumash called Kedushas Levi. You ever heard of the famous Hasidic Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev?
Yeah.
So his commentary on Chumash is called Kedushas Levi. And Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev asked the following question. So when the Torah talks about what's inscribed on the stones, the Torah says, V'nasa, this is in Chav Ches Chav Tes, 28-29, V'nasa Aaron Eshmois b'nei Yisrael b'Choshen HaMishpat, Aaron will carry the names of the Jewish people in the breastplate of judgment, Ali boy on his heart, B'voy ala Kodesh, when he enters the holy, Zikar lefnei Hashem, as a remembrance for Hashem, Tamid, constantly. Okay, so the focus clearly is on the names of the Jewish people. Ruvain, meaning referring to the names of the tribes that represents the Jewish people. So Levi Yitzchak and the pasuk is saying that Aaron is carrying those names as a remembrance before Hashem. And the Sforno actually also says, commentary Sforno says that by the names being on the being worn by Aaron, that's a reminder. So that's supposed to bring the merits of the tribes before Hashem as a merit for their descendants. So Levi Yitzchak asks that any time, typically when we talk about the merits of the fathers for the Jewish people, who are we referring to?
No.
Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And there's no mention of them here. Here we talk about the tribes. And we're talking about the tribes as a remembrance before Hashem. Typically, we always have Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov being the ones that their merits are being mentioned on behalf of the Jewish people. And here, there's no mention of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The mention is the 12 tribes. Now, the truth is that the Gemara says that the names of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were inscribed also on these stones. They were. But at the end of the day, the Torah doesn't mention them. So Levi Yitzchak wants to know, why is it that when it comes to invoking the merits for the children, the Torah doesn't mention the fact that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's names are on it. It only mentions the names of the tribes. So he explains in the following way, and this is the way I understand it. We say every day in our brachas, in the blessings of the Torah, Hashem chose us from all nations and gave us his Torah. And when Hashem chose us from all nations, that means that Hashem has a greater love for us than other nations of the world. When you choose someone over someone else, right, very often that's because of the fact that, that one finds more favor than the other. If you're looking for someone to do a job, okay, you pick the guy to do the job the best. But Hashem Barchabanu Mikolo Amim means to say Hashem chose us from all other nations, and it was a choice that he made. It's not something that he had to do. It's not something that we hadn't necessarily had the merits for. It was really the promise made to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But he chose us from all other people, means he chose us, and based on that, we understand that Hashem has a love for us more than all other nations. When Aaron was also chosen, right? He was chosen out of the rest of the Jewish people to be the Kohen, the one to do the service in the Beis HaMikdash. So one might think, well, he was chosen over everybody else, means that Hashem loves him more than us, than the rest of us, because he chose him over us. Says Gushas Levi that no, it's not that way, because actually Hashem loves us the same as Aaron, and he says in a different piece that actually Aaron being chosen to be the Kohen was really out of the love for the Jewish people. Aaron was chosen to be the Kohen, to bring atonement for them. And actually in this week's Parsha, when it talks about, basically Hashem tells Moshe, bring close Aaron to do the service, to be the Kohen, it says, the pasuk reads, "V'ata akrei ve'elechas Aaron achicha," you shall bring to you Aaron your brother, v'espan of Itai and his sons with him, mitoch b'nei Yisrael, from amongst the Jewish people. It's not bringing Aaron close over the Jewish people, it's mitoch, from the midst of them. That means his choice is together with the Jewish people, because his choice is not because of a love for him more than the Jewish people, but because of the fact that rather his being chosen represents, manifests the love for the Jewish people. So therefore, the Torah focuses on the names of the tribes on the stones, because that is where Hashem wants everybody to see that Aaron is not chosen over everyone else, because look, he carries the names of the Jewish people with him all the time. It's not about Aaron. It's about Aaron representing the Jewish people. And therefore, it's not that Aaron was chosen over everybody else and Aaron is more loved and in some way we're rejected. But rather, it's all about the fact that Aaron is representing the Jewish people. His being chosen was because Hashem loves the Jewish people. It was out of that love. And therefore, he walks with the names of those stones on him to bring out that point, that it's not about him. It's about him and the Jewish people. It's about the Jewish people. That's why he's carrying the stones as a remembrance before Hashem. So we don't want to mention Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because the point here is that the point of mentioning the names of the tribes on the stones is to bring out this point, that Aaron's being chosen is not because he is chosen over the Jewish people, because look, even when he does the avodah, he's carrying the Jewish people with him. And they are the Zikaron before Hashem. They are the ones who are meant to invoke the merits for their descendants in front of Hashem. And therefore, it's clear that it's not that Hashem has a love for Aaron over the Jewish people, but he loves the Jewish people at the same and even more. It's all part of the love of the Jewish people that Aaron was chosen to serve. Have a wonderful evening.
But this is Aaron mentioned like first